Greetings and salutations. It's actually Monday, February 15th, as I'm recording this now. Got my little microphone here with me. I'm looking at the side roads, and I'm just going to assume that we're not having school tomorrow on Tuesday. So I'm going to get this out to you ahead of time because, well, roads look awful. So this won't take you a super long time period to do. So please take some time and get it done. Because to be honest, I'm looking at the weather reports. Oh, we may have a few of these this week. So make sure you stay on task, get your stuff done, and then I would like to see some of you guys get out and go help your neighbors, especially the elderly neighbors, to go shovel their lawns. Lawns? That doesn't make sense. Go shovel their walks, their drives, clean off their cars, help your parents out, go have some fun. But be safe, especially if you're driving your snowmobiles around. I know some of you country kids do that, but be safe on that. Don't want any accidents for you guys. But get out there and enjoy the snow. I can't remember last time when we would have had so much snow coming. But bottom line, be safe, get your stuff done, and have some fun. Get out of your house and enjoy the snow. But speaking of other things to enjoy, good segue, right? Here is your note set. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, boy. Let me do this again. Here is your note set. Dun, 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 dun. For Unit 1 of Europe. So Europe is going to be in two parts. So it's going to be a big section, but you guys have a jump on your vocabulary already because you guys were supposed to have done your analysis, term analysis, and we did them quite well. Very good. Those are in progress book already. So stick with your terms. Keep working on them. Definitely can work on your dumb down as we do this. Especially if we're doing a couple, 2 or 3 note sets this week. Probably just 2. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, do your dumb down at the same time. So anyways, here is the first unit for Europe. I know anytime we do the first unit of a section or first note set of a unit, it's never fun because it's always like, oh, here's a map. Here's the climate. But we kind of need to do that. So obviously, here's a map. This is something that we've already done, or some of you guys need to take your second map test of. That's the hope. I don't know why I still have my headphones on anyways. Hopefully all of that worked beforehand. So after the fall of Rome, so this is the time period we're talking about. You're like, Mr. Steyer, your hair looks terrible. Yeah, no, I can see it too. That's all right. I'm trying to judge. Too late. Europe is divided into many kingdoms, different kingdoms, as invading Germanic tribes swept in, hence the little broom there for your sweeping in. So where we last left off, before the religion section, Rome fell, and it's part of the reason is because the barbarian tribes that were all around them, the Visigoths, the Goths, the Anglo-Saxons, all those groups around them. So Europe is divided now at this point. If you've ever seen the show Game of Thrones, it's kind of like that. Everybody's fighting for this piece of the puzzle or piece of the pie. I don't know if everybody's really fighting for a piece of a puzzle, but anyways, fighting for piece of a pie or pizza pie, as I'm trying to say. That all these groups are just, doing what they can to make these kingdoms up. So that's what we're going to look at through this section, because the important part is how some of these countries get created, like France and Germany and England, because then it's a good prelude into what we'll talk about next year in U.S. history. So obviously, as with other places, geography plays a huge factor in the shaping of European events. And it's really because of 2 things. It's because of your water, which would be your main source, and then your land on the flip side of things. So let's look at the water. So it says most of Europe lay within 300 miles of an ocean or sea. So if I'm flipping back here, there we go. That is obviously looking at the internal part of Europe right here. Let me get my pointer going. There we go. That all around here, you're near 300 miles away from a big body of water. But also you have all these other rivers that are going through as well. So clearly, you're going to be one near a water source for a variety of reasons. So as we said, this opens up the economy for trade and fishing. Just look up north here, and you can see the North Sea. You get Black Sea's down there, but the North Sea connected to the Atlantic, to the English Channel. And so travel is not just something that you do by land, but it's also you can do by water, especially if you're England, Ireland, and Scotland up here, that you can go a variety of different directions since you're clearly not connected by land to the rest of Europe. But trading and fishing really opens up, and those are going to be big things as we create new economies and kingdoms throughout Europe. So rivers such as the Rhine, the Seine, or Seine, as some people say, the Danube, and the Po made travel and trade easy. So there's an example of like the Rhine. Look how big this is. Oh, you can see all those little cars on there, but it's really, really wide. Now, of course, the bridge didn't always exist at this, time period we're talking about. So you have water pretty much everywhere, and it's deep, and it's wide, so you can have a lot of different ships on this of various sizes going all throughout. I believe this is Danube, and there's the Po for my Teletubby fans. Anybody? Po the Teletubby? No? You guys are too old for that? Yeah, right. You're probably still watching Teletubbies. But anyways, and there, again, another element of this, as you see, and we'll talk about this later in another note set, is the importance of castles, but where they park things is like right on that river because it's a source of energy. It's a source of supply and resources and trade too. So some of these cases, you might have a big old castle sitting on top of here for defensive purposes, or because it's just really pretty, or you like to fish off the top of your tower or something, but that probably didn't happen. So anyways, these seas provided for safety as well as chances to trade. Britain and Ireland were separated from the rest of Europe by the English Channel. So if I scroll really quick back, sound effects are awesome, aren't they? Okay, so if we go back here, here's that English Channel that goes right through there. So that's an element of something that we'll talk about is they're kind of off on their own, and they're separated. So what that will do is that will create a unique culture for them. As it says here, this allow them to develop their own distinct ways of life. So you might see things in England or Scotland or Ireland that are not exactly the same that you would see in other parts of Europe, like, this English telephone booth or creepy guys like Austin Powers. Austin Powers, anybody? Yeah, really creepy guy. So let's talk about the land then. So the land is unique in Europe in that it is all different types. It's not just, flat or prairie, kind of like you can see in the bottom picture. It's not all hilly or rolling in the upper left. Some of it is actually mountainous and a combination of all three. You can see the snow caps there in the mountains as I look outside, and I'm seeing a lot of snow coming down too. So, yeah. Anyways, so water is a huge part, land is a huge part. So, for example, especially these mountains, it says the Alps separated Italy from Central Europe. So if I go back to a map again, it would be helpful if I just put it on the slide because you're like, stop going back and forth. I'm like, I don't care. All right, so if we go back to here, so here is Italy. The Alps run right around here, right where you see Switzerland. So that does cut off Italy, and we talked about that before with Hannibal and Carthage. Remember, we said that Hannibal was sneaking across the Alps because, there it is. I knew I had a map there somewhere. I just had to go one more forward. Because no one would dare go across the Alps, especially like when it's cold and snowy. And he said, nope, I'm going to do that and fool everybody. So you can see how the Alps would just cut everything off. And look at how far the Alps extend. They go all the way from the left to where France is, through Austria, and all the way down here, even into Sarajevo, Belgrade, which would be what we use Yugoslavia at one point. So it's a very big mountain chain. But that, again, cuts Italy off from everybody else. And then you have the Pyrenees over here. We kind of thought that Spain and Portugal were off by themselves anyways. But now looking at, you've got the Pyrenees cutting them off from France. There's another element that kind of keeps some of these places, like we said, England, Scotland, and Ireland, off by themselves. So their cultures are going to be a little bit different and can expand on their own. And some places might be a little more hesitant to actually invade them if that were the case. And then you had another group called the Carpathians, actually Carpathians, some will say, Carpathians, which cut off Russia from Southeast Europe. So some people say, you can see this here, Carpathians, in the lower part of Poland, which would be the eastern part of Europe, that some people are going, well, why don't we talk about Russian history when we talk about European history? Well, they're cut off and they're kind of doing their own thing over here. Technically, Russia is, what we recognize as Russia, is in Europe and Asia because it hangs over top like a hat. Well, you have this thing called the Ural Mountains, which kind of splits the two up. Uh, it kind of cuts Russia off from everybody else, as well as the Carpathians. So it's technically in two continents, but they really have their own ancestry and history that's not necessarily linked immediately to Europe. Now, when we get into the World War I, World War II, gonna be a little bit different. Yeah, especially when the Germans tried to invade Russia. Dumb move. So, anyways, the mountains, as I said, made it difficult for one group to rule all of Europe and allowed for the development of independent kingdoms. So when we talk about cultures and new countries, you got to talk about the land. You got to talk about the geography. It makes sense to do that because it really plays a part into the creation of these different entities. So what we'll start talking about here is now what's recognized as the Germanic kingdoms. So these are the barbarian tribes that invaded Rome and took them down, and now are going to be, oddly, these smart guys and start ruling what would be Europe. Uh, Now we can't mock them anymore and say bars because they're going to be our ancestors. They're also the ones who are developing these new countries. They're bringing in religion, specifically Christianity, and on the Catholic side of things. So we're going to start at the very beginning of about 500 AD. So this is post, 434-ish when Rome falls. That these Germanic groups or kingdoms start to be created. And if you look at this map, you can see the the Norsemen up here, the Danes, and you're like, that's Denmark. Yeah, that's where it comes from. The Scots, which are oddly going to be over here for Scotland. Soon enough, Ireland's going to have its own thing. The Angles, the English, and you're like, the Britons are down here. Yeah, so some of these will end up moving. The Anglos and the Saxons will come over here. The Normans will invade as well. The Franks will be France. The Goths are doing their own, eyeshadowy things down here. So these are your original groups to begin with. So where it starts with, and I know my name is like covering things up, or my face is. There we go. You have a guy named King Clovis who starts it all off. Great name. King Clovis. Awesome curly beard there. I should do that sometime. Oh no, might take me some time, but how's that looking? Is that pretty good? Yeah, whatever. I don't have the long flowing locks. But anyways, there's King Clovis. He leads? Yeah, he leads that Frankish kingdom again, which is right there in that middle of France. Kind of got a plain Jane crown on. And it says Clovis became a Catholic and his people soon followed. So this is important. This is a huge, huge thing for us to talk about in this unit, is you have to understand, and that's why we had that religion unit, the connection between religion and politics. That nowadays will be like separation of church and state, separation of church and state, right? But they didn't really have that back in Europe at the time period, and it's going to lead to blows at some point between the Catholic Church and the leaders of your kingdoms. So Clovis becomes a Catholic and his people soon followed. So if you look at this here, you're like, why is he half naked wearing a barrel? Anybody know what's happening here? Anybody? Anybody? Catholic rite, Christian rite? Is baptism. So he's getting baptized by the church. So now you have a linking of the monarchy and the Pope, or which would be the Pope, and coming together. That's a good thing, because if his people are Catholic and he becomes Catholic, he has their back, they have his back. He becomes Catholic, the people may come Catholic too, and then you have that joining as well. So this is pretty important for him at this time period. So now King Clovis dies. And you're like, well, that was pretty quick. Right. We can talk forever about this guy, or we can talk about, how it leads from one thing to the next. It's kind of like stepping up on a ladder. So Clovis ends up dying. You've got this Catholic entity or tie to the Christian church already. And then his land gets divided up. His land gets split up. And his nobles are called mayors, and they end up ruling his land. So they take his land, split it up, and they have that term, which we have today, of mayors ruling over his lands. So one of your main mayors at this time period is a guy named Charles Martel, who also has one of the coolest nicknames of all time, being called the Hammer of God. So there you have Charles Martel down below, and he ends up getting support. He was one of the mayors during this time period, and he ends up getting the support of the Pope. So here's a good, what we call a rub from someone in power saying, yeah, this is my guy. I'm the Pope and I'm backing Charles Martel. So he ends up becoming essentially this king at the time period. And he also helps Christianity here because he goes in and defeats the invading Muslims, who we talked about in the last unit. You're going to have a series of these battles here soon enough called the Crusades, where he heads east, the Muslims are coming west, and they meet. And not only is he successful in defeating the Muslims, but also as he's going out to meet them, spreading Christianity all throughout Europe. So, clearly a negative, fighting in terms of, the religion and killing a lot of Muslims. But the positive for them on this side of things is that advances Christianity as well. So, line of succession. So when Martel dies, his son Pepin, not Pepin, that would be creepy, but his son Pepin becomes the Franc king, basically the king of France. After he defeats a group called the Lombards in Italy, he donates conquered land to the Pope. So Martel gets that rub from the Pope. He does well, helps bring in people to Christianity, defeats the Muslims. He dies. Pepin, his son, takes over. Pepin advances the church because he goes to Italy, which is on a map previous that I showed you, defeats the Lombards there, and he donates the conquered lands to the Pope. So now the Pope has power in the form of land. Not only do they get to have a rub on these other politicians, but the politicians are now giving them land. So here's where you start to see that rise of the Catholic Church and the power of the Pope. And it's going to be something that the kings are going to go head to head with at some point. So the Pope gains these lands, gets power in the form of land, something concrete, something physical, and now rules over these lands as if he were a king, and they become known as the Papal States. So the Pope is now in power. So that's where we stand. And this is something that we're going to watch as we do this, is we're going to see how the monarchs have their power, obviously, how they transition the power, whether they gain it from someone or they conquer, or it's given to them by way of family, or, is sorry, not or, but and the rise of the church as well. So we'll see which ones end up having the most power from this point afterwards. And are they going to go head to head? You betcha, because it'd be a sad story if, didn't have a little action right there anyway. So that is your first note set. So be able to tell me how land and water help to create these kingdoms and to separate these groups so they have their own culture. Be able to talk to me about King Clovis gaining power, Charles Martel, and then Pepin. So you do have a lot of guys or a lot of people in this section, so just make sure you stay up with it. So how many minutes? 17:45. High five myself. Yeah, so that's all it takes. 20 minutes to this nose thing, and you're done. Go shovel somebody out, go have some fun in the snow, and go bake some cookies or something. Chocolate chip. No nuts, though, because nuts and cookies are just awful. Unless it's peanuts for, like, peanut butter cookies, I'll take that. But no, nuts and cookies, kids. If you learn nothing else, don't do that. It's gross. But anyways, I'm out of here. So chances are I'll probably see you again tomorrow on computer. I know you're looking forward to it. But anyways, that's it. Get your stuff done. Turn it in. Have a good one.